Sky's Sally Lockwood is in Jerusalem for us tonight. And Sally, what's the very latest update on the situation?
Yeah, well, as you say, Gillian, the Red Cross has reported that 2 coffins have now been handed over to them in Gaza, and they're in the process of transporting and handing those 2 coffins to the IDF in Gaza, understood to be another 2 deceased hostages. They will then be brought to Israel and, I imagine, identified, or at least go through the process of identification overnight. If indeed they are identified as deceased hostages, that will bring the total number recovered so far to 12, with the remaining 16 still to be recovered and returned under the rules of this first phase of the ceasefire. But it's not a straightforward process. The International Red Cross has said it could take days, it could take weeks to recover the remaining deceased hostages. Some may never be found. And we understand an international team is now helping with the digging and recovery efforts in collapsed tunnels and under piles of rubble. But certainly it is proving to be a cast iron condition over whether the Rafah crossing, the only crossing between Gaza and Egypt, the only crossing that it doesn't border Israel, it's proving to be a cast iron condition over whether that will reopen. There's been a lot of uncertainty this week, a lot of uncertainty tonight after the Palestinian embassy in Egypt announced that it would reopen for individuals, not for aid, but for individuals to potentially be reunited with their families in Gaza. Well, that was swiftly contradicted by the Prime Minister's office in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that Rafah would not be reopened until all of the deceased hostages were returned. Israel is viewing that as a serious violation of this first phase of the ceasefire agreement. And in turn, Hamas is accusing Israel of violating the ceasefire with another deadly incident. 9 Palestinians said to have been killed in Gaza City just yesterday, travelling in their vehicle when it was hit by Israeli fire, something that Israel has defended, saying that the vehicle appeared suspicious. Either way, it is proving extremely complex, extremely messy, and still deadly. And something that could prove key in all of this is that Israeli media is reporting that the US Vice President J.D. Vance could be arriving in Israel on Monday with envoy Steve Witkoff. And I've spoken to UN officials here in Israel who are here and part of the organisation and planning for this second phase of the ceasefire, which involves Hamas potentially demilitarising and a new authority governing Gaza, something that still needs to be decided. I asked them what that looks like, and they said it's all still extremely unclear. So this potential visit on Monday by the US Vice President could prove absolutely critical, not just in this very tense, very fragile ceasefire holding, but critically also what happens next.
Sally, thank you. Some breaking news to bring you now, and Sky News has learned that the 2 leading candidates to lead the government's national inquiry into grooming gangs are a former police officer, Jim Gamble, and social worker, Annie Hudson. But some victims have expressed concerns that the candidates' backgrounds in policing and social work might lead to conflicts of interest. One campaigner told Sky News that these are exactly the institutions that let us down. Well, Sky's home editor, Jason Farrell, is with me now. And Jason, are these candidates still likely to be considered now with this criticism in the fray?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think they're going to go and meet some of the survivors. They are the key characters that we've learned now who are in the frame for this incredibly important job. The government has thought about this for a long time. There's been a lot of heat on them. There was a motion in Parliament recently saying that there was deep concern that these chairs hadn't been appointed yet. Well, now we know that it's down to these 2. I mean, there could be someone else come in, but what we know now is that Annie Hudson, who's chair of the Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel, which oversees problems when a child has been harmed and looks at systemic failings. And the other person is Jim Gamble, who ran CEOP, that was the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, which was revolutionised the way that police looked at online child abuse and groups working online. Now, this criticism, that there's as a social worker or police officer and they come from those institutions that have let these people down, there has been a lot of calls for a judge to lead the inquiry, someone who has understanding of law and can look into it. What I would say is, of course, Louise Casey was a social worker, and she did the review that actually led to this inquiry being prompted and happening. And Jim Gamble is someone who has criticised the police. I mean, he did the review into Child Q, which found that there was racism involved in the strip searching of a black schoolgirl. And he was critical not just of the Met Police, but the Commissioner as well. So these are people who have held power to account in the past. But it will be, the survivors will meet these people on Tuesday. They'll take a view on it. But it will ultimately be up to the Home Secretary and the Prime Minister to make that final decision.
OK. Jason, thank you very much. So we shall know on Tuesday. Nottingham Forest have sacked Ange Postecoglou after he failed to win any of his 8 games in charge. The final decision to dismiss him as head coach came after Forest were beaten 3-0 at home to Chelsea at lunchtime today. Lisa Dowd reports.
It was the final straw.
Could be a costly defeat for Ange Postecoglou, 8 without a win for the Aussie now.
A 3-0 defeat, and the boos were followed by the inevitable. Ange Postecoglou dismissed after just 39 days in charge at the City Ground, one of the shortest reigns of any Premier League manager. The results under the Australian coach were just not good enough.
He was never wanted by the fans, and I don't think he's done anything to endear himself with the fans.
Right decision for you?
Yeah, completely the right decision. I'd rather take anybody over him.
I quite feel sorry for him. If I see him at the bus stop now, I'll give him a lift home. I feel quite... He didn't have that much time to prove himself, and like you say, it was big shoes to fill.
At the end of the day, results is what you need, and it wasn't there, so that's it, he had to go.
On Friday, he said he was excited about the future.
There's been a major change. I am trying to change the way we play. The players are adapting, but there's inconsistency in there for sure. But some will look at the weeds, I'll look at what's growing, and I think... So the flip side of that is that I'm really still excited about the opportunity here.
On Saturday, he was gone. The second manager sacked by this club this season. Success has raised expectations at Forest. They have brought European football back after so many years, but they are owned by a man who is notoriously difficult to please. The owner, Evangelos Marinakis, left his seat in the stands halfway through the latest defeat. The Greeks' methodology is to act on instinct rather than wait for things to turn round.
I love him. I absolutely love him. I feel that he has the well-being of Forest rooted in the centre of his ideology. I think he's a passionate owner. He's not like you see the American owners from a lot of other Premier League clubs where I'm not sure they even know where their stadium is, let alone what's going on in there. He wears his heart on his sleeve.
They're now in the Premier League relegation zone, looking for another new manager, with just days to go before their next European match against Porto, here on Thursday. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Nottingham.
The family of Virginia Giuffre say Prince Andrew's decision to give up his titles is a vindication for their sister and survivors everywhere. Andrew says he decided, with the King's agreement, to give up his titles, including the Duke of York, because allegations surrounding his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein were distracting from the work of the royal family. Ms Giuffre, who died in April, accused Andrew of sexual assault, something he's always denied. There are reports tonight that Andrew made Virginia Giuffre sign a gagging order to avoid spoiling the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Thomas Moore reports.
It has been a humiliating fall from grace for Prince Andrew. No longer the Duke of York, nor Knight of the Garter, the palace finally cutting ties after years of sleazy allegations about his links to the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, all of which he denies. In particular, the claims of Virginia Giuffre that he had sex with her aged 17 have haunted him. She took her own life earlier this year. In a statement, her family said, "We, the family of Virginia Roberts Giuffre, believe that Prince Andrew's decision to give up his titles is vindication for our sister and survivors everywhere. This moment serves as a victory for Virginia, who consistently maintained he knows what happened I know what happened, and there's only one of us telling the truth, and I know that's me. This is not just a victory for her, but for every single survivor of the horrific crimes perpetuated by Epstein and his co-conspirators. A lawyer representing some of Epstein's victims said they want Prince Andrew to come clean on what he knows.
For many years, I have urged Prince Andrew, and unfortunately, he's still Prince Andrew, even though he's no longer a duke, to speak to law enforcement, urged him to. The United States Attorney for New York urged him to. He's never done it. He just has kept his silence. But this is following him because the story is still alive in the United States.
According to the palace, Prince Andrew gave up the titles voluntarily. It's not clear whether he was under pressure from the King or William, the Prince of Wales, after the drip of allegations. Documents released by the US Congress have indicated he was a guest on Epstein's private plane and appeared to receive several massages. And an email recently released show he privately kept in touch with Epstein after he said publicly that he had ceased contact. But it is perhaps the publication next week of Virginia Giuffre's posthumous memoir that was the final straw for the palace. It's likely to have been spooked by the potential for further damaging allegations and the reputational risk for the royal family. Prince Andrew will continue to live at Royal Lodge, a 30-room mansion on the Windsor estate. He has a private lease with the Crown Estate, but it is unclear how he affords it.
I wonder whether there's going to be increasing talk about Andrew's occupation of the gigantic Royal Lodge, the huge palatial Royal Lodge in Windsor Park. He has a lease, of course, but royals have been asked to give up their lease before. I think people will be saying, so Harry and Meghan have to give up Frogmore Cottage, but you get to keep this huge Royal Lodge when you're no longer working royal and you're actually in disgrace.
In Windsor, there was little sympathy for the prince.
From what I've heard, I reckon bin him.
Prince Andrew's been in the papers for years, embarrassing the royal family, not just with all these sexual assault allegations, but also with all his business dealings.
Yeah, we don't like him having any privilege at all, to tell you the truth. But where else is he going to go? Well, I mean, what are they going to do?
He was too involved in some things that were not good for their reputation. But their reputation as a whole still stays.
Prince Andrew vigorously denied allegations against him in the statement released by the palace, but he is now a royal outcast and his troubles are far from over. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Windsor.
President Volodymyr Zelensky appears to have failed to convince President Trump to supply Ukraine with Tomahawk missiles. Zelensky reiterated his desire for the weapons when he met Trump for the third time this year at the White House. But the US president expressed concern they could escalate the conflict. Our military analyst Sean Bell has been taking a look at what the repercussions could be for Ukraine.
So President Zelensky's visit to Washington was probably not as successful as he might have liked, but it is worth setting a little bit of context to the war. There is over 800 miles of front line in this war between Russia and Ukraine, and the fighting has been intense all the way along it. But although it was expected to be a very difficult summer for Ukraine, in reality, the front line hasn't moved significantly this summer. But Russia is on the front foot and it is advancing. Where Ukraine has made definite gains is by attacking Russian energy infrastructure deeper inside Russia itself by using some of the long-range weapons. And that has created fuel shortages and also undermined Russia's exporting of oil opportunities. The challenge, of course, as you can see from the yellow line here, is that the range of the weapons is relatively limited. What long-range weapons would provide is Ukraine a chance to target significantly more of the Russian energy infrastructure, and that's why they wanted the Tomahawk missiles. Unfortunately, very early on in the meeting yesterday, President Trump clearly took the Tomahawks off the table. He also proposed that there was going to be a freeze on the front line. That might suit President Trump, might also suit President Zelensky, but it's quite clear that President Putin has no intention of stopping the war anytime soon. It's also pretty clear that Trump believes that President Putin is ready to end the war, despite the lack of any evidence to back that up. So for the time being, the Tomahawks are off the table, at least for now. Of course, all of this follows a 2.5-hour telephone conversation between President Trump and President Putin earlier on in the week. And the outcome from that was a further meeting between the two leaders. It's very difficult to know why that was agreed, given the abject failure of most of the meetings up to now, particularly the one in Alaska, where despite the warm words from President Putin, there were clearly no actions that followed from that. So why is Trump taking this strategy? One of the reasons he's doing that is he's a negotiator. He wants to get leverage. What he's actually got with leverage at the moment is it's clear that President Putin is worried about the prospects of these missiles being given to Ukraine. He's worried about the impact that will have on his energy and oil infrastructure. Therefore, it prompted him to call President Trump. That's why he's not put them on the table, but it means that he's found a pain point for President Putin and therefore a negotiating opportunity. Of course, the big problem is the venue that they've chosen for these talks. That is Hungary. The risk here is it hands a massive PR opportunity to President Putin. Firstly, this is going to be Putin landing on European soil. All the surrounding countries are signatories to the ICC, who have issued an arrest warrant for President Putin. Clearly, and also Viktor Orban, as seen here, is a key friend of President Putin. There will be a genuine warm welcome and a red carpet rolled out. So unless President Trump can actually end up putting some keen deadlines and ultimatums on the table, President Putin will walk away from these troops emboldened. So will it work? Well, Trump and Zelensky clearly want to find an end to the war, but President Putin is not going to stop until he achieves his objectives or he's forced to stop, whether militarily or economically. And this is where the big difference between Zelensky and Trump becomes apparent. President Zelensky believes that he's got to force President Putin to the negotiating table. That's why he wants Tomahawk missiles. Whereas President Trump believes that might risk escalation. He wants to give negotiation a chance, despite the fact there's no evidence that that is achieving any sort of success. And that, of course, the irony of all of this is the longer they try negotiations, the more President Putin prolongs the war, and therefore Trump prolongs a war that actually he's trying to end.
US President Donald Trump claims a submarine carrying narcotics has been destroyed en route to the United States. The president says the vessel was loaded primarily with fentanyl and other illegal drugs. Writing on social media, he said there were 4 known narco-terrorists on board the vessel. 2 of the terrorists were killed. At least 25,000 Americans would die if I allowed this submarine to come ashore. The 2 surviving terrorists are being returned to their countries of origin, Ecuador and Colombia, for detention and prosecution. Hundreds of people have joined a protest in central London calling for the government to scrap its plans to introduce digital IDs. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer announced last month that a digital ID system would be mandatory for people working in the UK as part of a bid to tackle illegal migration. Campaigners have raised concerns about civil liberties and data protection, as well as the cost of setting up and maintaining a system of digital IDs. Record-high fountains of lava are being spewed out by Mount Kilauea in Hawaii as it experiences its 35th eruption episode since becoming active in December last year. One geyser has been recorded reaching up to 1,300 feet into the air. No Kings demonstrations are being held across the United States over the direction the country is taking under President Donald Trump's leadership. Organisers say they're expecting more than 2,600 events to take place in a mass mobilisation against the president's policies on immigration, security and education. NBC reporter Melanie Zanona is at one of the protests in Washington.
Millions of protesters have turned up to rallies all across the country, and that includes right here in D.C., President Trump's own backyard. There has been a huge turnout. The crowd has been really fired up, and I've been talking to people about what motivated them to come here. One of them, a former federal worker who was forced out of her job, she said she came here alone because most of her friends were scared to be persecuted. Another, a healthcare worker, worried about the immigration raids and what impact that's going to have on her community, including the healthcare system, many of them workers themselves. And another, just a man concerned about the general direction of the country. He says he loves America, but he's worried about the erosion of the democracy here in the United States. Now, this protest does come amidst a government shutdown in Washington. The Capitol Police, who are not being paid right now, are part of what is a very heavy police presence, including some snipers on a nearby roof. But in talking to the crowd here, everyone wants to send a message not only to President Donald Trump, but also to their elected officials in Washington as well.
A UK film studio owner says business has already declined because Donald Trump is threatening tariffs on films made outside the US. Our arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer was at the London Film Festival to look at the impact any taxes would have on the industry here.
All smiles at the London Film Festival, but away from the glamour, having recovered from COVID, there's a new threat.
It is a question that's got the film industry baffled. Can Donald Trump put a tariff on foreign-made films?
Few here can fathom how it'd work.
Donald J. Trump, I don't know that he's generally known for his understanding of culture. And this is a man who wants to concrete over the rose garden.
At the end of the day, all that we can do is keep making movies that we believe in. Well, keep forging ahead and doing that as long as we're able.
Causing much confusion, in September, Donald Trump posted that America's movie-making business has been stolen by other countries like candy from a baby, claiming he'd authorised government departments to put a 100% tariff on any and all movies that are made outside of the United States. And he'd threatened the same back in May, describing Hollywood's shift abroad as a national security threat.
What has been the impact of having the President of the United States threatening to impose a tariff then on films?
Oh, it's had a massive effect.
Frank Khalid is the owner of West London Film Studios. Major productions from Bridget Jones's Baby to Killing Eve have all filmed here. While Apple TV's Ted Lasso is currently being shot on one of their sound stages, this one is empty. And Khalid feels Donald Trump's declarations haven't helped.
Prior to him posting that, we had quite some big major features come to us looking for space, and it's just gone very quiet since he posted it. Maybe it's a coincidence, I don't know, but I believe it has affected us.
He's not alone. While for the biggest studios, the industry is finally finding its feet again after COVID, some smaller studios have told us they're monitoring the situation closely. Farnborough International Studios said that they've seen film bookings and inquiries slowing down since the first sign of imposed tariffs, even though they've recently hosted major TV series for companies such as Paramount and Amazon. And Yorkshire's Production Park said that while they've not seen any slowdown in bookings, they're tracking wider policy changes.
There's a huge number of questions about how you actually make tariffs work. It seems like a silly example, but production accountants. We train production accountants. Nowhere else in the world does. We planted those seeds 20 years ago, and we're now reaping the dividends of it. It's not going to be cheaper to make those films in America, so they'll just make less. The worry, I think, is that it makes film companies slightly more nervous. They're making commitments now about projects they're going to make in 27, 28, 29, and probably they dither a bit more over signing that off.
With little detail, for now, few working within the industry can see how tariffs would deliver the happy ending of shoots returning to Hollywood that Donald Trump might desire, without driving up costs and stifling investment. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Time now to get all the very latest sports news with Gavin.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
This is typical Toure. Absolutely brilliant. Yaya Toure tries to place it and does. Yaya Toure may just have delivered the Premier League title as well.
When I started from my academy, I always loved goals. During my career, he was thinking about me not defending or running backwards, but I always keep in my mind always in the same way, like enjoying football, share that with fans, and be happy with something, you know what I mean? Because I've never been happy chasing people. I've always been happy when people chasing me. I was playing a midfielder, and sometimes I have to do my duty as defending, try to protect the defense, the fullbacks. But it's only one ball. Two guys can do that. Me, I have to attack, and I've always been obsessed with goal.
You're a product of the ASIC Academy in the Ivory Coast. It's produced loads of amazing players.
What was special about that academy specifically?
Yeah, it's pure about football and passion than desire, you know. And at a young age, we learn tactics, but we were more technical. We learn as well about different position as well, playing the games, because in our development as well and education, we know we're gonna face different coach during our career and we need to adapt. When I arrived in academy, for 2 years, I've been playing without shoes, learning degrees, learning touching balls, skills on my feet, understanding all the area of my feet. My feet was getting hurt. If I take my shoes now and you see my feet is a bit ugly. When I learned how to control my feet without shoes on it, and understand the ball clearly, purely, skin to the ball, is different.
The kind of famous story is about you going to Arsenal for the trial. Tell me about that.
The idea was Arsene Wenger was encouraging the CEO of Belgium clubs to keep me here in Belgium for one more years to complete the Belgian passport, and after that I can come back. Because at that time I was not European. I need to have a European passport. And for me, that last of time was too much for me. When I was in Ukraine, it was a transition, like I was alone. There I started to learn more about myself, how resilient I am in terms of adapt myself. No one speaks English, they speak Russian. And me, I was speaking French and a little bit broken English. And I go to the point that I have to go to school, I have to learn, I have to understand. And at that some period of the day, I cannot go out of the house from 4 p.m.
Why?
Because they're not used to see. And it can be dangerous, you know what I mean? Because there have been some problems in there in the past when I was there. Some students went to Ukraine to study, and they've been able to go to the clubs, but that's why the clubs tell me to not go out. It was tough for me, but it was the learning as well. That's where I start to discover and understand the world. That's what I'm talking about. I think this move, at the time I was thinking it was wrong, but now I realize it was right.
If there's ever going to be a legend at this club, then it's this man. You have to have, first of all, to be a legend, a tremendous amount of talent. You need to have longevity, and then you need to be there in key moments. And I just want to remind a few of them. First league winning title, 2 goals against Newcastle, Yaya Toure again. Second league title, Crystal Palace away, Yaya Toure again. League Cup final against Liverpool, Yaya Toure. And if you're not going to be a legend with that, you're never going to be a legend. Thank you again, Yaya.
For you, what was your greatest achievement?
You have to know it. Ivory Coast win the AFCON, because even now when I go and Ivory Coast just have some time with friends, close friends or older friends, they're always gonna ask me, okay, you win trophies, but for your country you never win. Why you cannot win with your country? You know what I mean? That was the question mark, and it was my brain all the time. If I didn't make that, it will be the one that will stay in my, you know what I mean, my head for life. But obviously, thank you God, I made it.
When you finally gave it up, were you happy with what you'd achieved? Were you happy with your career?
Chris, definitely. I don't want to start playing football again. Since 9 and 10, when I start to take that seriously, I was being on that for, until I retire. It was incredible. Intensity, determination, hard work.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. When we come back, I'll be joined by journalist and author Christina Patterson and broadcaster and financial analyst Albi Amankona. Amongst the stories, we'll be discussing this on the front of The Observer. Their headline, "He lied to me about Epstein." Emily Maitlis, Prince Andrew and that interview. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.